Thank you. Well, that was lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Tom, welcome to BAFTA.
Thank you. Thank you
and
very
indeed
much.
to your life and pictures. But comedy as a background for an actor who will later become a dramatic actor too. I mean, how important, how good a grounding do you think it is?
Well, because it's such a bitch. Yeah, pardon me, but you know, because you are it is either funny or it's not. So it's the epitome of sink or swim. The chops that you develop in comedy are the chops that you will not be slave to, but they will serve you in other aspects of storytelling. There is a timing to it. There is a pace. There is the supreme task of give and take with whoever else you are there for, acting with in the scene. And not to start the anecdote parade, but here's one. The very first job I had, which was in Splash, was with Ron Howard. I had been doing a comedy television series and got fired from it, went off the air, and I was desperate, you know, to be funny again, quite frankly. And the very first read-through of the script, of the screenplay, had all the actors and John Candy and Daryl Hannah and Eugene Levy, everybody was there, all the key department heads. And I was operating from the task that had been mine when I was on the TV show, which was to score, which was to kill, which was to take the lines and get laughs at the table. And I did it, you know, like flop sweat mercilessly, trying to get laughs around this table. And it was terrible, and I didn't get any laughs, and I felt like I had failed. And Ron took me aside that day, right after that reading, and he said, look, I know what you're doing, because I've done things. You're trying to be funny. You're trying to score. That's not your job in this movie. Your job is to love that girl. And if he hadn't said that, you know, he could have all said, hey, he could have fired me that day, to tell you the truth, but he had done TV, and so he knew what the things I had fallen into, so he cut me some slack. God bless the boy.
So after Splash came Big, where you're playing a boy who is sort of transported into the body of an adult. That actually had attracted the attention of a number of straight actors who were interested, I gather, in, you know, just the actual challenge of doing that. I had read somewhere that De Niro was once interested.
He was involved in it for a while, and that was one of those things where the studio changed hands and suddenly the entire slate shifted. Yeah, it's kind of nice. Hey, yeah, that's right, yeah. Hey, sorry, Bob, you know.
And then, of course, along comes Sleepless in Seattle, which changes romantic comedy, I think. Do you think, in what way?
You said it. I don't know. That was, you know, that was Nora Ephron, who wrote that with her sister Delia. She landed on this concept of hearing somebody's voice on the radio. And the fact that they never see each other and they don't really know who each other are, that was the structure of a screenplay and the filmmaker. And the conversations I brought to, I was probably very cranky with Nora at the beginning of that, because I kept reading and said, it's this kid, that's a kid, he's got a kid, it's the kid scene, the kid's the guy, the kid's the catalyst, it's just a kid, yeah, it's a kid's movie. And she said, no, you have to be a dad. And then I said, well, then you have to write it like a dad. Which I'm making a joke, but actually sometimes we did come down to words like that. And she says, what do you mean? I said, you're a woman, you're a mother, you're basing this on your experience with your boys. I'm a man. My relationship with my boys is nothing like this. For example, she wrote a scene where Sam was going to go off for a romantic weekend with this other woman that Jonah didn't like her, and so he didn't want it, so he was throwing a fit. And in the screenplay, Sam, the father, did not go because he didn't want to disappoint his son. That was in the screenplay. And I told Nora, I said, that is such horse shit. Let me get this straight. A man has not gotten laid in 4 years, and he's got a shot to get laid this weekend, and he's not gonna go because his son doesn't like the girl? I got news for you. That kid's going to the sitter, and I'm going off to get laid.
And that same year, you made Philadelphia.
Yeah, boy, we're blowing through this career pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yes, and then I made Philadelphia.
Well, sadly, it has happened to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour.
Yeah.
But so you made Philadelphia, which, okay, so we're now looking back 20 years.
93, yeah, 93, yes.
And at that point, how radical, because it's always pointed out as, you know, so how radical was it to play a gay lawyer?
Here's what was radical about it. It came out and it entered into the national zeitgeist literally a third and a third and a third. A third of the reaction was, this is a groundbreaking movie. A third of the reaction was, this is nothing but a tepid pot boiler that doesn't really touch upon the subject that it pretends to touch upon. And a third was from essentially the gay segment of the world that said, this movie has nothing to do with us and what we have been facing. And for 3 weeks, the first week it came out, and then it was forgotten the second week, but it was still playing. And the third week, the great gay activist Larry Kramer, who I have since met and talked to about this very thing, he wrote the most devastating negative article that said, why I hate Philadelphia. So he came out and had a very, very, I mean, it wasn't loaded with vitriol. It was just his opinion, and it was so strong that overnight we became controversial. And everybody then had to go and see well, not everybody, but enough people had to go in and see the movie and weigh in what we thought of, and that actually brought in a ton of those very Americans who thought, I don't know anybody who's gay, and AIDS hasn't touched my life. So it ended up being a touchstone, as the cinema can do.
So an Academy Award for Philadelphia, followed the next year by another Academy Award for Forrest Gump. So Forrest Gump, who, rightly or wrongly, is nearly always one of the first film titles that is associated.
Yeah. Every time I walk into somebody's living room for the first time, they always say, son of a gun, Forrest Gump in my living room. Elevator rides with people. Oh, I can't believe Forrest Gump's in the same elevator as I am. Yeah, I get it. It's worthwhile.
So how did you settle on Forrest Gump, on the stance, the voice, the whole kind of bearing?
In casting of the young Forrest had a particular dilemma in which Bob says, what do you think we should do? And we talked about it for a while, and there were a number of, you know, it's a hard role to cast. A lot of professional actors, a lot of professional kid actors, and we, I don't know where it came, but we realized that, Bob, you will never get a kid in order to recreate something that I come up with, you know, theoretically. What has to happen here, I think, is you've got to cast a kid, and then I follow where that kid goes. And young Michael Humphreys came from this part of Tennessee that is literally really more of a part of whatever state is below Tennessee. What is it, Arkansas, Mississippi? I don't know. But he had this accent. He had this way of speaking that I would engage him in conversations with a tape recorder and just get this weird kind of cadence that we were together. It was in South Carolina. We were riding out to see the house that they had built, the set of the Gump house, which is not a real house. And we were just in the car, and I was saying, so Michael, what does your father do? And Michael said, my dad makes grease. And I said, how do you make grease? He said, I don't know, but they use it in lipstick and motor oil. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Well, then he said to me, can I tell you what my favorite movie of yours is? I said, sure, what is it? Well, I like all of your films, but my favorite is Dragonette. So taking him, and everything that came out of Forrest was based on him, the way he held his hands, you know, this opposite way, and the way he just kind of had this, it all came from little Michael Humphreys.
You reteamed with Ron Howard for Apollo 13.
Yeah. I wanted to make Apollo 13 even before Ron did, because I'm a space geek, and I knew the story and whatnot. I thought it was going to be fascinating. Then Ron and I met at some point. I said, I'd like to do it. My only thing is that do you think that anybody would buy me as an astronaut, an accomplished astronaut? Because astronauts are like they are in, you know, Roger Ramjet cartoons or the Fantastic Four or The Right Stuff. You know, they're chiseled and they're American this, that, and they're fit. And Ron said, well, you know, I think it'll be okay. Well, thanks for that vote of confidence, Ron. But then, in the course of doing it, I met Jim Lovell, and I thought, I am exactly like Jim Lovell. Jim Lovell is funny, he's a family man, he's very proud and very competitive as far as what he does. And what the only difference is he's really good at flying jet planes. And he wanted to be an astronaut for the same reason I would want to be an astronaut. He read this ad one day. It says, somebody is going to go to the moon. And I said, well, if someone's going to go to the moon, I'd like that to be me. So that ended up actually, Apollo 13 opened up an awful lot to me because I stopped being self-conscious as whether or not I could bear the physicality of being some guy who does something as amazing as fly to the moon, because it turns out bald-headed guys flew to the moon, you know?
Next you worked with Steven Spielberg.
Oh, yeah, yes. Oh, God, yeah.
So this is the beginning of, actually, I mean, you worked with Steven Spielberg on a number of occasions, but this is Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, yes.
And obviously you'd also worked with him on Band of Brothers in terms
that
of
later on,
producing.
Yeah.
But at that point with Saving Private Ryan, was there the feeling that you wanted to give the whole experience of World War II, I mean, to go at it in a different way, to present it in a different way, to have a different understanding?
In fact, yes, because look, I've always been a student of it. It goes back to, in high school, KTVU Channel 2 reran Thames Television, The World at War, narrated by Laurence Olivier, and I went to school the next day asking everybody, did you see it last night? Did you see it? And they were all, what? Did you not watch The World at War last night, you idiots? It was fantastic. It was the best nonfiction, it was the best entertainment I could possibly imagine. So I had been a student of it, and there had not been anything other than genre movies made about World War II in, I don't know, 20 years. So when Saving Private Ryan came around, and the script was very much completely in flux, and when Steven takes over a script, that's really just a blueprint for the movie that he's going to make, particularly with as much visual, cinematic elements to it as that I knew about it and desperately wanted to be involved. And when Steven called me and said, hey, look, there's a script called Saving Private Ryan, I know! I almost said like that. And we talked about it, and I said, look, with your abilities and motion picture, the science of making movies now, you could really blow the lid off of what everybody's concept of the World War II movie. It will no longer just be a caper movie or a genre movie. You'll be able to address, you know, so many specifics that it will be a tactile experience for the audience as opposed to an intellectual one or a, you know, a stroll through history. And that's, you know, Steven did that in spades in the course of the movie. And it was an experience, man. I can only tell you.
And you've managed to, you have a sort of a great slate of films whereby you can do something like the Da Vinci Code films and Angels and Demons,
those are fun.
which are, you know, great big
scavenger hunt films, I always call them. Theological scavenger hunt films.
Because the critics were a little bit iffy about the first
one. Oh, they hate
one,
everything.
They don't hate everything. They don't hate everything.
Well, you know, the Da Vinci Code book was like this inexplicable hit, you know? It's like, why is everybody on the planet reading this book? And it's because it's fun, because it's a fun scavenger hunt. And likewise, yeah, there might be another one. And Dan Brown, it's, you know, he stumbled onto this, it's essentially like doing a Sherlock Holmes movie, you know. You do have to do research in order to understand what the heck what you're really talking about. When I would read the books or read the screenplays, I do it with Google right next to me, because you're setting in a place so you could go on and see what the picture was and see the artist references of it and get the history of it, you know, right there. And it ends up kind of like it's like taking a great summer course in art history, making those films. And, you know, you get to run around, the, you know, Piazza di Popolo at 3 o'clock in the morning in Rome, and some guy says, for you, I open, for you, I open. Come, sit, eat, for you, I serve the food, all good, for you. And that's like 3 o'clock in the morning, they're making pasta just for us. This is not a bad gig at all.
So as we gather speed on this journey through your career,
It's
really,
I'm in free fall now.
It is really speeding
Terminal
up.
velocity, folks. Hang on to your hat. I think we're going to be done in 4.5 minutes.
It's going to be like something from Gravity at this point.
Yeah. Hold on.
We are moving towards a couple of real characters you play. One is Walt Disney, and the other is Captain Phillips.
Oh, yeah.
I was actually going to do Walt Disney first. I'll tell you
Bring it on.
why. Because the interesting thing in all of this, well, first of all, Walt Disney never been played on screen before.
Only by Walt Disney, you know.
Yeah. Now, was this an issue?
Was it an issue?
Yeah. Was there? I mean, did you have to be very careful? There are things about the reputation of Walt Disney because he's quite a controversial figure.
We wanted to, and the problem was, in the current atmosphere of pressure in films, like for example, Walt Disney died of lung cancer. He smoked 3 packs a day. Can we show him smoking in a major motion picture these days? No way in hell. It's just this kind of like thing that has happened that real people can't smoke. If you are smoking, it's like Mad Men. You're making a comment on how much everybody smokes. Let me tell you something about Walt Disney. You go back and you see all these photographs of him, like on sets or on, you know, where Disneyland is being built, and he's pointing like there, and he's pointing like there, and he's pointing like there with 2 fingers. He was pointing with 2 fingers because he had a cigarette in between them, and they airbrushed out the cigarette. That's why he's going like this everywhere. So we had a scene in which now in the film you see me putting it out, so you don't actually see it lit in my hand, but you see the definitive putting out of a cigarette. And I think Walt even says, you know, I don't want everybody to see me smoking because I don't want anybody to get, you know, pick up bad habits, which was true. He didn't want anybody outside his, you know, the world of Walt Disney to see him smoking. But Richard Sherman of the Sherman Brothers, you know, he said he always knew Walt was coming to visit you because you could hear him coughing at the end of the hall as he's walking.
You get some of that in the film as well. Is there a little line, maybe even in the film, a slight sort of apology for having taken Mary Poppins and made of it something slightly different?
No. No, and in fact, Mary P.L. Travers hated the movie.
Yeah. And went on hating it for years.
And went on hating it for years and did not like Walt. Walt was a guy that, you know, he'd win and then he'd move on, you know, to the next thing. Because he always had, you know, 5 years of movies in the pipeline, and he was building Walt Disney World in Florida at the same time. So he just wanted to charm everybody, call them by their first name, wish everybody luck, and then move out of the way. And Mrs. Travers did not let that happen.
Well, it's a great, Saving Mr. Banks is a great hymn to traditional filmmaking, if you like.
Yeah.
It's made in a kind of rather lovely retro traditional filmmaking.
It's on a set and it's on film.
Yeah,
and yes, there's real horses in it.
So it could not be more different in that sense from Captain Phillips, which is so much in the moment, that kind of immersive storytelling. I mean, you're talking about working with Spielberg and what you wanted to do with Saving Private Ryan, but in a sense, this is even taking this even one step further, isn't it? Putting you right inside the experience for the duration of the film. There's a tiny bit of preamble, and then you are absolutely in it then.
Yeah, that's Paul Greengrass. We had, you know, so much of this is, look, I'm lucky in that I'm invited into the process early on, it's always like, let's make this movie together. And so long philosophical discussions, and also very pragmatic discussions with Paul about literally how to make the movie. Because no matter what was in the book and what's in the screenplay, we are going to get to the place. The plot is there. We know what the plot is. But what's the procedure and what's the behavior? And it is shaped, in this case, by the real ship that we were on, and it was, you know, clumsy and hard. And Paul wanting to examine the graphic reality of not only kind of like piracy, but also commerce. I mean, those ships are ugly, rusty, unglamorous things to go through. But to be a captain on board it is the most complicated job you can imagine. I was talking to Rich Phillips. I asked him about the romantic thing. I said, Rich, how often do you ponder the horizon and, you know, breathe in the fresh, salty air and think, you know, thank God for God's great ocean? He said, Tom, I haven't done that for 35 years, you know. But then you have, well, what's the hardest thing? You know, what's the deal about being being a captain? He says, I'll tell you one problem, the human behavior. So what do you mean? He says, I got to deal with 3 unions. There's 3 unions on board a ship. There's 20 members of the crew. 3 unions. That means overtime. That means pay scales. That means complaints. That means coffee breaks, the length of them. That means union rules that were busted. And I'm gonna file a grievance against Maersk Corporation. That's the kind of stuff that Rich Phillips has to deal with. And you can incorporate that burden into the guy, provided Paul Greengrass is going to give you the moments in order to explore those things other than just the plot and the shot in order to move the story on. And that was the way we did it all. Paul, Paul, because he's a documentarian, and it took me a while. I ran into Matt Damon, who had done 3 films with Paul, and I said, so what's the scoop? And he said, you'll rehearse for a long time, and then you'll finally shoot, and the first take is a disaster because everybody's talking on top of each other and everybody's trying to get their beat in. But don't worry, it'll settle down and you'll get it. And he does not stage the action as much as he captured it after the fact. So we would shoot long takes, sometimes longer than the magazine could hold. We completely stopped seeing the cameras after a while because we would have 14, 15, 18-minute takes that would just go on and on and on and on and on. And then we would stop and we would figure out what new had been impacted in that and incorporate it into the next one and incorporate it into the next one. So as actors, we had this flow from beginning to end that was not truncated, it was not abbreviated, it was not like a section. And I oftentimes I learned really quick. I'd go over to Paul and say, are you going to get that little bit that me and Shane are doing at the charts? And he said, we got it already. I said, when did you get it? Oh, about 2 takes ago. And I said, I didn't notice. And that's just the way it's extraordinary to be in the midst of it because as an actor, all you have to do is behave. Paul did things like, in this film, we did not meet the Somali actors. And then the day came where we shot the hijacking and they came on board the bridge. We had never met them. They came roaring on, loaded for bear, pumped up, their veins sticking out, their teeth scared. They were the skinniest, scariest human beings we'd ever seen. And there was bona fide hair standing up on the back of your neck fear for the better part of 40 minutes, 4 or 5 takes, in which everybody just re-geared up. And then we had 15 minutes in order to figure out what we're going to do next. Then we finally said, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. And what did Barkat Abdi say to me? Oh, I can't believe I'm making a film with Forrest Gump. This is
Thank you so much.
We have expired our time. I'm all out of charm. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't talk too fast or too much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I really enjoyed this.